Some good news today that annual rate of inflation has dropped faster than expected in the December quarter, 5.4 down to 4.1%. It's still outside the RBA's target range of between 2 and 3%, but let's hope come next Tuesday, when the bank has its first meeting for the year, we won't see a rise in our official cash rate. Joining me now for his analysis, Herald Sun business commentator Terry McCrann. Well, good news for consumers and homeowners, fingers crossed today, but some of that retail data, Terry, was a worry. Shops are really feeling the pinch. What's your assessment from all this data out today?
Good news, bad news, Peter, out of all the data we've had. Good news, yes, inflation has fallen much faster than expected, particularly by the Reserve Bank. If it had its time over again and it could see these numbers coming, I doubt they would have hiked rates in November. It's certainly, any suggestion of any further rate hikes now is completely off the agenda. And indeed, the Reserve Bank has to start thinking about rate cuts, because the bad news is why inflation has fallen so sharply and so unexpectedly, because those high rates are working. They are hurting consumers. They are hurting home loan borrowers. Add to that all the other cost of living pressures on people generally in the community, and this is really seriously damaging the economy. We could start to see the economy turn seriously ugly over the next couple of months. It's already looking pretty ugly with those retail sales numbers. Consumer spending has cratered, and so the Reserve Bank really has to think about cutting going forward into next week and indeed into March.
What about this, I'll call it a PR exercise, the BCA is pushing a tax summit. I remember the Rudd tax summit, which was a stunt. It went nowhere other than into trouble. I think the mining tax and perhaps even the carbon tax was in that tax summit, and they weren't any good. And then, of course, we had the jobs summit last year, another PR stunt. Why on earth would we want another summit? Don't we just want politicians to do what they said they would do, what they legislate on tax?
Well, A, we want them to do what they said they would do, 100 times at least from the Prime Minister. But secondly, we don't need a summit. We don't need a new Ken Henry report analysis to know how to improve our tax system. I mean, the idea that we can fix the tax system for all time is a fantasy, but how to improve our tax system? And it's precisely what the government did, the opposite of what they did this week, or last week, because what we need is not to have higher tax brackets which impose bracket creep on taxpayers, are a disincentive to work or a disincentive to get better, but actually lower tax rates on the personal income tax side, lower corporate tax rates, and indeed, as we've seen time and again across the world, when you do that, you actually generate more revenue because you generate more activity, you generate more employment, you generate more profit. So the solutions are easy, but it's the will and the sort of cynical politics that we've seen over the last week which are defeating this whole process.
All right, another set of bad numbers this week for the NDIS. Forecast that costs will blow out to around $125 billion a year by 2034. That's 3% of our GDP. It's 3 times what we spend on Medicare today. Remember, Medicare's for all of us. The NDIS is forecast to be for around 830,000 only. Plus, that number's double our defence budget. Now, around 55%, Terry, of those under 18 on the NDIS have been diagnosed with autism. National Cabinet said, yeah, it was going to do something about it. It sorted out. It would stop the cost shifting with the states. But honestly, I remember when it was created, it was supposed to cost us $14 billion a year. How does this go on?
It's staggering, Peter, isn't it? It's just utterly staggering. But where's the surprise? Whenever governments start to spend money, what they say they're going to spend on a program is always way, way below where they end up. And it's not just they're spending every year like something like the NDIS or the healthcare or whatever, but it's also the big projects. Malcolm Turnbull's big battery, Snowy 2.0, forecast to only cost $2 billion. It's now heading for $20 billion, and who knows where it will end. And with the NDIS, I would guarantee you that when we get to 2034, 35, we'll say if only it was costing $125 billion. It's going to be end up costing much more than that, because precisely the way you've identified, you suck in all these users of the system.
Right, this is pretty incredible. Down to Victoria, it cost $2.1 billion last year to operate Victoria's fire services. Now think about that. Victoria is the smallest of our mainland states, and its operating costs were more than double that of Queensland. Now Queensland's nearly 8 times the size of Victoria and a hell of a lot more remote communities. The wages bill alone, Terry, $1.1 billion. The union out there right now wants a 25% pay rise over 3 years and over $100 million in bonuses. Now, who on earth here, Terry, has got their hands in the taxpayer till?
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Dan, who rode to power in 2014, Dan Andrews, by buying off all the public sector unions. The police, the firefighters, the teachers, everybody in the public sector. And the chickens have sort of really multiplied since then, because it's just blown out. And it's not just the money, as you know, Peter, it's not just the pay each week, it's the conditions they get, the very attractive conditions they get as well on top of that. So you need far more people working over the course of a week to deliver the service. And we've ended up now in 2023, 2024 in Victoria, where we're paying these extraordinary sums across the public sector, and we're not getting the public service out of them. I mean, it's just an appalling mess, and it's not going to get any better under the current government.
My viewers will just have seen there on screen, right across the board, the cost of fire services in Victoria, as I said, the tiniest of the mainland states, is double that and more of every other mainland state. You're right, Chairman Down is the fault there, but so too is the current government are not fixing them either. Terry McCrann, great to have you back on the program for 2024. Thank you for your time.